James Morrow, thank you so much for joining me from what looks like a fun bar in Pittsburgh. Listen, what is the mood that you're picking up? Because I'm seeing such conflicting signs. For one, a huge turnout, of course, in the early vote, way up on last election. There's something like 69 million to 58 million. Some say, well, that suggests bad news for Donald Trump.
Well, look, some people say that, but I think there's a lot of noise, and I think there's a lot of noise out there in the media right now that's trying to discourage Trump voters to say it's all over, you've got no hope of winning, don't even bother, just stay home. You know, we saw this at the 2016 election, and I feel like, Andrew, almost every conversation I've had about this election cycle, we could have had 4 years ago when people were again saying, well, you know, there's just no way that this guy Trump can win. It's going to be a Hillary thing. Hillary's going to walk in with it. And there's no chance for the Donald. And I think that we're looking at something similar today. One thing that's telling, Andrew, is that we were in Pittsburgh, downtown Pittsburgh today, which is exactly, you know, it is in this absolute Democrat island in this much larger Republican state. Everybody was very, very much voting for Joe Biden, everybody we talked to. But here's the thing. I caught almost no enthusiasm. They were doing it almost like they were going through some ritualistic sort of thing. And when we started to probe them as to what they were really interested in, it was more about getting rid of Trump, and nobody had any positive thing that they could say. They said, oh, well, he'll maybe do something more about racism, or he'll maybe do something more about COVID, but very few actually had any concrete idea about what Joe Biden is standing for besides being, you know, not Trump. And I heard a lot of things. I heard Trump called a fascist. I heard people say Trump should be arrested, you know, all sorts of things like that. But nobody really had a positive reason that they were getting out there, Andrew, for Trump.
Yeah, but if they're really motivated by hatred of Donald Trump, they'll still perhaps go and vote, won't they?
Well, it does, but that's going to get you about 40% of the vote. There's probably about 40% of the electorate that absolutely loathes the president, and that's not great for Trump. But you have to get over 51%. You have to get over 50% to get the presidency, and unless you have something positive to sell to people who are on the fence, unless you have something positive to say, you know, this is how America will be better, and in a concrete way, not just in it'll be nicer, and the president will be more of a normal guy who doesn't tweet mean things about people. You need something more than that, I think, especially, Andrew, in a voluntary voting place like America, unlike Australia, to get those people out, to get you over the line, because as we see, the Trump supporters are very, very deeply committed as well.
Now, I noticed, picking up on what you said in this Democrat little enclave around Pittsburgh that you're in, about the people mentioning race as a factor. Well, we saw overnight rioting in Philadelphia after police shot dead a man, an African-American guy, coming at them with a knife. They shot him dead. There was the familiar scenes now that we've seen of rioting, dozens of police injured, shops looted. How does all that play out, do you think, in the election context?
Well, this is really interesting because I had more people this morning here in Pittsburgh from Australia saying, oh, you got to talk to people about this Philadelphia thing. Are you going to go to Philadelphia? I had people in Australia wanting to talk about that with me. More than anybody here who I talked to who's voting today actually had heard about it. I talked to maybe 20 or 30 voters, and maybe 3 or 4 had said, oh, we heard something happened in Philadelphia, saw maybe a headline, but hadn't really heard about it. So it's interesting. It's making more of a cut through in international media that's interested in this race than it is in the local media here. But one thing I will say, Andrew, is if violence starts up in the next week, I think it will be a sign that the Democrats are getting nervous, that they're going to move to these sort of desperation tactics of ramping up violence again, which, remember, they tamped down on as soon as they started to realize that this was really, really, really hurting Joe Biden in the polls. So they may start to let this sort of thing get out of control again, maybe as a bit of a threat, saying, you know, if you want things to be peaceful, vote for us. Otherwise, under Trump, we're going to keep going down this road.
Well, it's so interesting. Nothing in this election seems to make sense. Touching on what you initially were talking about, the enthusiasm factor. You know, for a guy that supposedly, what the polls are saying, 9 points ahead of Donald Trump in the polls, again, we saw yesterday that Joe Biden can barely get you know, a busload of people to one of his rallies while Trump has got thousands to his. It just doesn't seem to compute.
And everywhere you go around the country, you see these videos of these sort of Trump motorcades where hundreds of people get in their cars with Trump flags and things like that. And we're going to be out looking for some of that later on. We see Trump supporters going to Biden rallies just to heckle and outnumbering by 10 or 100 to 1 the number of people at the Biden rally. And we've also seen Trump with his masterful trolling going and using clips of Joe Biden's back and forthing on fracking. And we're going to be going in the next couple of days to fracking country in Pennsylvania to talk to people about how they feel about Joe Biden's energy policies. And he's been using them in his rallies. So Joe Biden is getting more airtime at Trump rallies than he is at his own.
Well, look, I find this the most fascinating election. I am looking forward to seeing what you make of Pennsylvania, because that's, of course, one of the swing states. Donald Trump must hold it, and basically, you know, Joe Biden's got to win it. So look forward to catching up with you closer to the day. Next Tuesday, big day. Thank you very much, James Morrow.
Thanks, Andrew. Good to have a margarita with a mate.
Good on you, mate.